Welcome to Light Novel 904, your go-to place for immersive light novel audiobooks. Sit back, relax, and enjoy stories brought to life through voice. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new chapter. Chapter 16. At the northern Yan border, Qingzhou City. Inside the city, the skies were filled with distress and dullness, while outside the city, the ground was scarred and pitted. Within a mountain forest 100 miles away, colossal figures with varying shapes lurked, casting a myriad of demonic shadows, along with some slender figures, who had the appearance of humans, sitting cross-legged on the peaks. The ground here was stained with blood, and skeletons lay around like piles of firewood. The flayed skins hung loosely from branches and stones, like ragged cloths. At this moment, a beautiful young woman, holding the arm of a corpse in military armor, was gnawing on one of the fingers. Her lips and cheeks were smeared with bright red blood, but she seemed utterly unconcerned. Suddenly, a black speck appeared in the sky, racing towards them at high speed. As it drew closer, it was revealed to be a massive three-clawed black bird, over 10 meters long. As it contracted its body, when it landed, it had transformed into a graceful-looking young man with a black headband, walking briskly towards a group of seated figures, and then approaching a youth draped in white who had a long zither lying across his knees. With a leisurely strum of his fingers across the strings of the zither, soothing sound waves emerged, though his gaze was set calmly on the distance, looking toward the city, that seemed like an unsightly stone. There one could faintly discern the ominous clouds amassed above the city, and the vague silhouettes atop the walls. Monik Bai. The youth with the black headband greeted with a slight bow, showing respect as he addressed the white-clad youth. I've just received news. The disposable flesh we sent earlier failed, and even alerted the Divine General Mansion. Now the entire mansion is on high alert. They say there's a master secretly protecting the child. To fail at such a task. Worthless trash. Standing by, a robust and giant man's expression darkened, his lips parting slightly to reveal sharp teeth unlike those of a human. Didn't you say he had already infiltrated close to that child? The beautiful woman gnawing on the arm frowned, stopping her chewing to cast a glance at the young man with the headband. Half a month has passed, and his identity surely has not been revealed. How could he have not found an opportunity to strike in all this time? A young man with yellow eyebrows spoke up with a furrowed brow, to prevent any misinformation from the Divine General Mansion, that Marquis Xingwu deliberately concealed the child's true circumstances. That's why we sent a flesh of the Zhuqian realm for this task. If a sudden punch was delivered from close range, not even someone at the 10th level of the Power Passage realm could avoid it, let alone if there is a master guarding at his side. They would not have time to react, right? The young man with the black headband sighed. We have no details on what happened, only that the creature turned out to be so useless. HMPH, not only did it fail, but it also alerted the Divine General Mansion. If this news reaches Lai Changan's ears, he'll surely send more people to protect the child. Damn worthless thing. The burly man grunted angrily once again. The young man with the headband nodded slightly. The next assassination will only be more difficult. Since that flesh has failed, there's no need to keep its family alive. Let the little ones below have their fill. They've already been devoured. The beautiful woman bit off another finger and spoke while chewing. The young man with the black headband said no more, instead turning his gaze toward the white-clad youth who had stopped playing the zither, his eyes revealing a hint of awe. Monik Bai, what should we do next? Shall we launch a direct assault? The others also looked over, waiting for his command. Monik Bai's emotions seemed undisturbed as he continued to stare at Qingzhou City in the distance, speaking softly. This Lai family is indeed a tough bone to chew. If we were to launch a direct attack, our losses would be too great. Indeed, those scoundrels are unwilling to put in the effort. Damn them, the sturdy man said discontentedly. So, do we still go through with the assassination? The youth with the black headband inquired. Monik Bai turned to look at him and said, what do you think? Since Lai Hao's attack, the vigilance at the Divine General Mansion had significantly increased. He Jianlan deployed powerful individuals from the inner court to guard the front court, and had every house servant who had entered the mansion in the past 3 years carefully screened. There was a lot of commotion surrounding this matter, but each court cooperated actively. After all, the assassination had been perilously close, and no one wanted the same to happen to their own child. After an investigation by the Lai family's intelligence network, it was found that the assassination attempt was linked to the demons of Northern Yan. Lai Hao sought out his aunt to keep the news of the assassination attempt from spreading to Northern Yan, from reaching the couple's ears, so as to not affect the war on the front lines. Hearing Lai Hao say this left Jianlan in a daze, and as she looked at Lai Hao's young face, her heart felt as if it was being tugged at something. The child had barely escaped assassination due to the conflicts in Northern Yan, yet still worried about its impact on the front. Truly a thoughtfulness that was heartrending. However, the commotion caused by the assassination was too significant, and keeping it a secret was impossible. News quickly reached the Northern Yan border. Marquis Xingwu, who was contemplating the military arrangements in the camp, was enraged, and Jai King was also uncontrollably furious. They immediately discerned the demons' intentions of using Lai Hao's death to demoralize the army, compelling them to leave the Northern Yan battlefield. Should they abandon the front, this side would undoubtedly be met with a thunderous assault. Marquis Xingwu couldn't possibly ignore the battlefield here. In his rage, he immediately sent a trusted aide from his side back to the mansion to guard Lai Hao closely. The mansion reported that the assassination attempt was thwarted by someone covertly protecting Lai Hao. But Marquis Xingwu knew well that he had not assigned anyone to secretly guard Lai Hao. With the mountain and river courtyard guarded and located within the divine general mansion, it never crossed his mind that someone would attempt to assassinate a child. If Lai Hao had displayed extraordinary talent in martial arts, he would have concerned himself and sent someone to protect him secretly, to prevent the Lai family's potential prodigy from perishing in the cradle. But for someone without martial arts talent, posing no threat, to nearly be harmed in such a manner. And all this was due to the damned stalemate before him. Several days later, at the northern Yan battlefield, the Lai family's army struck like lightning, purging a nest of demons overnight. The news spread, and all demons felt the Lai family's wrath. Days eventually settled down and became calm again. Half a year passed, and Lai Hao turned 7. The news of the assassination attempt had happened half a year ago, and by now, no one in the household brought it up anymore. In the meantime, the powerful protector sent back from the military by the Marquis of Xingwu had been following Lai Hao closely for the past 6 months. A tall and upright middle-aged man who seldom spoke or smiled, acted cautiously and meticulously, and was named Lai Fu. It was said that Lai Fu was an abandoned infant many years ago, taken in by the Lai family. People said that although the child's fate was tragic, ending up at the door of the divine general mansion was also seen as fortunate. That's why he took the Lai surname and was given a single name, Fu. In his early years within mountain and river courtyard, Lai Fu grew up alongside the Marquis of Xingwu. He was 7 or 8 years older than the Marquis of Xingwu. On ordinary days, he looked after the Marquis like an elder brother, but in the army, the two shared a senior-junior relationship. At the same time, Lai Fu was also one of the Marquis of Xingwu's right-hand men, a person he trusted immensely. "Uncle Fu, you lost again," inside the pavilion, as a game of chess concluded, Lai Hao said with a grin. Lai Fu's stern face revealed a hint of helplessness. "I'm of the same generation as your father, you should call me uncle." "But calling you Fu uncle sounds like admitting defeat." Lai Hao curled his lips. "When I play chess, I only want to win. I don't like admitting defeat." Lai Fu found himself speechless, his superiors in the family hierarchy propelled by this silly wordplay. "You can also call me Uncle Lai. But this is the Lai family. There are too many with the Lai surname. If I call you Uncle Lai, I'm afraid you'll get confused," Lai Hao said. Lai Fu was once again at a loss for words. "If you ask me, you shouldn't have been named Fu, since everyone says you're blessed. You should be called Lai Yu." Lai Hao said earnestly, "Look, the name Lai Yu sounds so nice. You have, it's as if you have everything, corresponding to perfection." Lai Fu felt an urge to knock on the boy's little head. Unlike the Marquis of Xingwu's by the book nature, this son of his was slick and smooth-talking. "Stop talking nonsense. If your father were here, he would certainly spank you for being disrespectful," Lai Fu scolded with a stern face. "But he isn't here," Lai Hao casually remarked. Lai Fu wanted to discipline him a bit to prevent him from becoming increasingly unruly, but this indifferent comment made his heart tremble. When the Marquis of Xingwu went on a campaign back then, he had also been by his side, and naturally knew that this year Lai Hao was 7, and so the Lord had been in Northern Yan for 7 years. The situation in Northern Yan made it difficult for Jai King, who initially accompanied him with the intention of swift victory, to leave. She couldn't neglect her husband's danger. The child before him had been without his parents' company for 7 years. It must have been hard, right? Lai Fu felt a pang of sympathy and his heart softened. He sighed. "Your father has his difficulties too." "Don't blame him." "I never blamed him," Lai Hao said seriously. Lai Fu looked into his eyes. His heart warmed slightly, feeling somewhat gratified. "You're very sensible." "Sensible?" Lai Hao cracked a smile. Just then, a half-grown figure turned to mountain and river courtyard. Lai Hao turned to look and saw Wǔxiá coming back from practice at the martial arts training ground. The little girl had now turned into a young lady. Her tender face couldn't hide her beauty. "Why are you back so early today? Are you hungry?" Lai Hao called out with a smile. Upon seeing Lai Hao, Wǔxiá walked over with her sword in arms, her expression somewhat sullen. "I'm not hungry," she muttered. "What, did someone upset you?" Lai Hao teased. Wǔxiá clenched her teeth slightly, turned her little face away, and did not speak. Lai Hao had asked casually, but seeing her reaction, he raised his eyebrows slightly. "Tell me what happened." "It's nothing." Wǔxiá got up, hugged her sword, and ran off, heading to the place where she usually practiced her swordsmanship. Lai Hao thought for a moment, then summoned the female attendant who accompanied her in sword practice, and asked, "What happened to Zither?" To report to the young master, Miss Zither was defeated in a swordsmanship contest at the martial arts training ground. Despite Lai Fu being present, the attendant still maintained a respectful demeanor, even though she knew that this young master was unfit for martial arts. "Just that little thing." Lai Hao was relieved and said, "So what if she lost once? As a martial artist, winning and losing are common in the military profession. She'll just have to win next time." "What, can't she accept losing?" The attendant hesitated, then said, lowering her head, "No, young master, the one who defeated the young lady was rather despicable, running down the young master in front of her, which is why the young lady is so upset." Lai Hao hadn't expected the issue involved himself, was the little one taking up his cause. Lai Hao glanced at the young girl in the distance, who was now practicing her swordsmanship, but looking visibly agitated. His eyes flickered slightly, and he told the attendant, "I understand, you may go now." Chapter 17. After the maid had left, Lai Hao did not continue playing chess, but stood up and walked over to the courtyard. Lai Fu also stood up. When Lai Hao did not speak to him, he reverted to his expressionless military demeanor, like a silent shadow, faithfully following behind Lai Hao. Lai Fu had asked the servants about the previous assassination attempt, had learned the details thoroughly, and felt a trace of fear. Especially these days of accompanying the child in playing chess, he was keenly aware that the position he was now sitting in was precisely where the assassin had been. Separated by only a chessboard. At such a distance, to exploit a child's full array of openings at a moment of inattention could mean death in an instant. But such an assassination had been stopped. It was uncertain whether to call the assassin incompetent, or the clan elder who intervened terrifyingly formidable, or perhaps the child was truly blessed with a large fortune. Therefore, Lai Fu took it as a lesson, clinging closely to Lai Hao's side during meals, drinks, and sleep, scrutinizing any house servant or maid who approached within 3 feet of Lai Hao with a hawk-like gaze. This caused the servants and maids in the courtyard to secretly groan every time they reported something to the young master. They did so with trepidation, scarcely daring to lift their heads. They were nearly becoming introverted. Seeing Lai Hao approaching, Bayan Ruxia slightly pursed her lips and turned her body away as if she did not want Lai Hao to see her. Lai Hao looked at her aggrieved demeanor and smiled warmly, ordering a servant to bring over a small stool and some cakes and fresh fruits, then sat down beside her and began to eat. Practicing swordsmanship with a distracted mind, you can't beat anyone like this, Lai Hao said with a smiling tone upon seeing the girl waving her sword chaotically, clearly distracted. Bayan Ruxia's eyes suddenly reddened a bit, and she stopped practicing. Looking down, she said, "If only Brother Hao could cultivate, with your intelligence, you would definitely surpass me in swordsmanship and become the most outstanding one." Having trained in the martial arts field for a year, Bayan Ruxia had improved rapidly, and as she grew up, her understanding deepened. She began to comprehend why, after the bone measurement, the adults looked at Lai Hao with that kind of expression. And she also understood what Lai Hao had truly lost in that year. Hearing Zhu's words, Lai Fu's brows furrowed slightly, a hidden sorrow and pity briefly showed in his emotionless eyes. This was not only a regret for the Lai family, but also for the divine general mansion. Lai Hao felt a bit helpless. He had not grieved for himself, yet the young girl seemed sadder in comparison. "Don't say that," he consoled. Lai Hao comforted her. "Practicing swordsmanship is so boring. Look at you, bearing wind and sun every day, enduring the hardest days of winter and summer. How tiring that must be. Unlike me, eating chilled melon in the pavilion during summer, playing chess, and in winter, curling up in bed to stay warm, sleeping until the sun is high in the sky. Now that's what I call happiness." Lai Fu couldn't help but glance at the boy. These indeed sounded like his kind of words. Without the divine general around, the other ladies of the mansion could not discipline him too severely, and Lai Fu had realized upon his return that the child had adopted a somewhat cynical outlook on life. "You're not afraid of hardship," Bayan Ruxia said, lifting her head. "What do you know?" Lai Hao responded with annoyance. "Look at me now, too lazy even to stand when I can sit, and to sit when I can lie down. Some hardships are meaningless. Otherwise, why would we have sweets? You're still young. You don't understand. Just focus on your sword practice. Don't talk nonsense." Lai Fu couldn't listen anymore and interrupted sternly. What kind of absurd talk was this? That enduring hardship was meaningless. Which soldier at the border was not enduring hardships? As a martial artist, the last thing to fear is hardship. The only fears were lack of talent and resources. This young master, comfortably unaware of his own blessings, lacked talent yet loathed hardship, not taking his own learning seriously, and now he was potentially leading astray the young Zhu. How could this be tolerated? Bayan Ruxia's talent in the way of the sword was something Lai Fu acknowledged. She was exceptionally talented and destined to achieve greatness in swordplay. In the future, she would become a protective umbrella for Lai Hao, and he could not let this mischievous young master undermine his future ally. "Fu, I think Hao is right," Bayan Ruxia hastily spoke up for Lai Hao. Lai Fu's eyes bulged with frustration. The young girl was too influenced by Lai Hao's words. If she truly got led astray by him, it would be disastrous. "Don't spill such nonsense to Zhu. You think just because I wouldn't dare beat you? If I did, even your father would approve." Lai Fu controlled his impulse to scold the well-behaved orphaned girl, and instead threatened Lai Hao sternly. Lai Hao gave a sheepish smile, knowing well that he found no common ground in this respect with the stern and rigid servant. And besides, the divine general mansion was a family of soldiers. The Lai family had always advocated frugality and the spirit of enduring hardship. Despite the fact that the ladies of various houses dined and dressed sumptuously, envied by all, in accordance with the standing and the foundation of the divine general mansion, they could actually live even more lavishly. The great lady, He Jianlin, had for many years eaten vegetarian meals twice a week. Although not a Buddhist, as a soldier who had taken countless lives, she did not say she did it for religious reasons, but rather to remind herself and her children not to get lost in this opulent luxury and forget the duty and spirit of a soldier. "Yes, you're right," Fu. Lai Hao agreed. "To Zhu," he said, "see, you made Fu angry. You should hurry up and practice your swordplay." Zhu blinked her small eyes and pouted slightly. It was clearly Hao who had provoked the anger. However, she did not argue. If she could take Fu's anger on behalf of Hao, she was willing to do so. Hearing Lai Hao's shameless remarks, Lai Fu was about to laugh in exasperation, rolling his eyes. This boy was indeed too difficult to discipline. Fu, can you help take a look and give some pointers to your swordsmanship? Lai Hao asked Lai Fu. Chapter 18. Lai Fu said indifferently, I use a knife, not a sword. The knife and sword are similar. The difference is not significant, Lai Hao said with a smile. What do you know? To train a weapon to perfection, even the slightest difference can lead to infinite variations, Lai Fu said irritably, but then restrained his temper, thinking that it was only natural for this kid, who did not understand martial arts, to see it that way. Lai Hao felt a bit helpless and continued to munch on fresh fruits, with one leg casually crossed over the other, watching Zhu practice swordsmanship. There's something wrong with your swirling style, he commented. Halfway through watching, Lai Hao casually offered Bai and Ruxu some tips. If you drop your arm a bit lower, it would look better. Don't talk nonsense, you're going to distract Zhu, Lai Fu scolded, frowning. An amateur advising an expert. That was simply preposterous. However, Bai and Ruxu ignored Lai Fu. She was used to Lai Hao's casual suggestions. Even though Brother Hao had not embarked on the path of martial arts, she found that practicing as he suggested always felt smoother. At that moment, as she lowered her arm and used the swirling style again, she indeed felt an understanding and ease in her heart. Lai Fu uttered a light Hao, not because Bai and Ruxu actually followed Lai Hao's advice after all. The young lady was too compliant with Lai Hao, but because, as Lai Hao said, a slight change in posture indeed added a bit more fierceness to the sword's momentum. He glanced down at the kid who was munching on fruit and sitting with his legs recklessly crossed. Was it a fluke? Or was he judging by what looked good? You need to use force in your waist. For a swirling style with a long slash, it's not just the hands that need force, the waist must drive the arms to swing out, Lai Hao suggested again. Bai and Ruxu nodded slightly, then executed the move several times in a row, finally grasping the essence of it. The sword's momentum created a breeze, and its power was visibly greater than before. Lai Fu raised his eyebrows in astonishment. One time could be a coincidence, but not twice. Could this kid actually understand swordsmanship and possess a talent for it? Although Lai Fu was not fond of Lai Hao's disposition, he had to admit that over the past half year, this kid had shown great intelligence, as well as a maturity and wisdom beyond his peers. Could it be that he actually had a talent for swordsmanship but couldn't display it because he was forbidden to practice martial arts? Thinking about this possibility, he couldn't help but feel a pang of sorrow. If that were true, what a regret it would be. With Lai Hao's casual tips, Bai and Ruxu's sword technique gradually approached perfection. There was no helping it. With Lai Hao's understanding of swordsmanship, just by watching for a few moments, he could integrate Bai and Ruxu's superior sword technique into his panel and directly achieve a level of near perfection. With his perfect level understanding to compensate for any flaws, he even skipped the perfect stage. As long as Bai and Ruxu grasped a bit of it, she could achieve a might comparable to perfection. Next, Lai Hao asked the young lady to perform for him the move she had failed to counter during their previous sparring. Bai and Ruxu obediently complied. Lai Hao understood immediately upon watching, and even imagined the scene of how his opponent had defeated him. However, he kept it to himself, considering that Lai Fu was there. It wouldn't matter if he showed a little bit of his understanding of swordsmanship, but getting too detailed would be too freakish. This sword move isn't good looking. I think the downward slash here should be changed to a sloping chop, and the elbow should be lifted behind, he said. It's better to switch from chopping to a straight thrust here, and don't shake your wrist, he pointed out casually. Bai and Ruxu was puzzled, but listened carefully, slowly comprehending Lai Hao's words, and then practiced again according to his suggestions. After several repetitions, she gradually came close to what Lai Hao had described. Lai Fu glanced at Lai Hao, and was now convinced that Lai Hao also possessed an extremely high talent for swordsmanship. Although the kid expressed himself in an amateurish way, really correcting Bai and Ruxu's form by what looks good and doesn't look good, being able to perceive the aesthetic of weaponry at such a young age was a talent in itself. After all, in the eyes of a genius, some things appear as a different landscape. Lai Fu sighed inwardly, feeling increasingly sorry for Lai Hao. The next day, the two went to the Eternal Spring Court for their morning visit, and afterwards, Bai and Ruxu hurried excitedly to the martial training ground. After the morning training, and lessons at the martial training ground had ended, Bai and Ruxu found the young man from the previous day, the one born out of wedlock, clutching a sword nearly as tall as herself. Her little face brimmed with seriousness as she requested another challenge. Upon hearing Bai and Ruxu's words, the young man couldn't help but burst into laughter. The other young men born out of wedlock who were crowding around him also mocked and ridiculed her. They didn't dare to provoke the other legitimate children too much, but Bai and Ruxu was, after all, not a member of the Lai family by blood. She was only betrothed to someone from the family, and the marriage hadn't even taken place yet. Besides, that someone in the family was already known as a useless person within the divine general mansion, and any one of them would surpass him in the future. That's why they naturally disliked the one sitting on a treasure mountain, enjoying endless resources and affection. Didn't Bai beat you yesterday? Haven't you learned your lesson? Want to stand up for that piece of trash? If you've got the guts, tell him to come himself. Bai doesn't even need to lift a finger. I could take that trash with both hands tied. HMPH, Bai already showed you mercy yesterday and you still don't appreciate it. You do have talent, but Bai has been training here for 8 years. If you want revenge, You might stand a chance in half a year, but by then Bai will probably no longer be here. Bai and Ruxu bit her lip, but continued to stare earnestly at the young man in the middle. Do you dare or not? Her words instantly fired up the young man's blood kai. The young man called Bai, formerly known as Lai Dongbai, was one of the 3 most talented among the legitimate children at the training ground, with a 7th grade battle body. Enjoying resources close to those of the legitimate children, he had already stepped into the Zhuqian realm. However, the martial training grounds regulation for skill competition required that the stronger party suppress their cultivation level to the same realm as the weaker party. And Bai and Ruxu's current cultivation level was at the 10th level of perfection in the power passage realm. Today, I'll make sure you lose clearly and unmistakably. Lai Dongbai's eyes were cold. He hadn't planned on provoking this girl with exceptional talent. He was simply chatting with his companions about something, and upon mentioning that trash in passing, he had expressed a few opinions, and had somehow been sought out by this girl. Although an illegitimate son, he too ate his pride and obviously wouldn't apologise. Thus the competition yesterday. Come on. Lai Dongbai took his position on the stage in the martial training ground. Soon, the area around the stage was crowded with people, all eager to see the sparring between these 2 illegitimate young prodigies and that extraordinary talented girl. On the outside of the arena, the martial training grounds instructor, that old military veteran, squinted his eyes and smiled, encouraging the spirited competition among these young folks. A good sword is forged from constant sharpening. Without struggles during their youth, how can they experience setbacks? How can they progress? They certainly can't wait until they are his age, an old bag of bones, to start fighting for their lives. Soon, 2 figures, one large and one small, were locked in intense combat within the arena. The same scene had been witnessed by the old military veteran just the day before, and today's difference was not significant, except that Lai Dongbai was striking with a few more degrees of ferocity. It seems that Zither is going to lose again, thought the old military veteran. After all, her training is too short. Though she has exceptional talent, she still needs tempering. Just then, inside the arena, the figures crisscrossed, and the fiercest sword technique was executed. With a zooming sound, a sword flew out, tumbling to land outside the platform, where it was skewered in the sand. The figures on the platform were also frozen in place. Frozen with them were the cheering and jeering voices from below the platform, and also the smile on the face of the old military veteran. Chapter 19. Iron Ruxu won. With a single stroke, she sent Lai Dongbai's sword flying, while simultaneously thrusting her own blade to halt just half an inch from her opponent's throat. The young man was so shocked that he stiffened. When he finally collected himself, he quickly retreated several steps, staring at the girl fearfully. This scene was beyond everyone's expectations. They stared at Bai and Ruxu, incredulous. Lai Dongbai, after 8 years of cultivation here, had been defeated by a little girl who had only cultivated for 1 year. Was this the disparity of talent? Bai and Ruxu withdrew her sword, her young face blooming with a radiant smile. She had won. She then looked up at the boy before her and said earnestly, I want you to apologise to Brother Hao. Apologise? To that useless guy? Lai Dongbai came back to his senses, his face instantly flushing with shame. He gritted his teeth and said, I admit that I lost to you, but I will not apologise. You. Bai and Ruxu furrowed her brows, unsure of what to do. She thought for a moment, then said, If you won't apologise, I'll just have to compete with you again. Childish. Angered, Lai Dongbai turned and ran off the platform. Sensing the gazes of others, he said nothing and ran straight out of the practice arena. The veteran in the army didn't stop the youth's departure. Some lessons needed to be learned on one's own after a setback. Instead, it was the little girl who drew his admiration. The finesse of her swordplay was already very close to perfection. This was no ordinary swordsmanship. It was of a high grade and quite difficult to master. The 9-tiered battle physique bestowed only the speed of cultivation, not the speed of technique mastery, which highlighted Bai and Ruxu's sword talent as rare and exceptional, just like her cultivation aptitude. Did she really tap into her potential just because of a small defeat yesterday? The veteran couldn't help but chuckle to himself. In the arena, the children of lesser branches watched the girl's figure with complex expressions in their eyes. They not only witnessed Lai Dongbai's proud defeat, but also recognized the disparity between themselves, children of the lesser branches, and those from the major courtyards. You're amazing. Several small figures ran towards Bai and Ruxu as she stepped off the platform. 2 siblings from the 5th courtyard, and Lai Yuanzhou from the 6th courtyard. They were the same age as Bai and Ruxu, with only a few months' difference. The youngest was Lai Yun's sister, Lai Shining, who had just turned 6 this year, and had recently arrived at the practice arena. And their sister, Lai Wuxiá, had already left the manor to cultivate with a famous master. It is Brother Hao who's amazing, Bai and Ruxu thought to herself. The 3 children gathered around Bai and Ruxu, chattering excitedly about the thrilling battle. Lai Yan, Lai Wuxiá's brother, was the most exuberant. Sure, do you want some milk crisp cakes? Suddenly, Lai Yan produced a wooden box, beautifully decorated on the outside, and gently opened it to reveal a fragrant milky aroma wafting out, with soft white as jade pastry inside. Here, have these. Bai and Ruxu leaned in and sniffed, enticed by the pleasant aroma. Her eyes sparkled with delight as she happily asked, All for me. If you like them, take them all, Lai Yan said with a wide grin. Thank you. Bai and Ruxu didn't forget to express her gratitude as she took the treats. The time had come to end the day's cultivation, so she waved her hand and walked away with the lunchbox in one hand and her sword cradled in the other. Lai Yun watched her departing figure, chuckling goofily. Next to him, his sister Lai Shining looked up, her face etched with confusion. Brother, wasn't that prepared by Mother for you? I haven't even tried it yet. If you want some, Mother can make more for you later. Zither hasn't had any yet, Lai Yun said nonchalantly with a silly smile. Lai Shining huffed, puffing her cheeks and turning to leave with a hint of jealousy. Ning Ning, you can have mine, said the short and stout Lai Yuanzhou, rushing over with a beaming smile. I don't want your hand-me-downs, the little girl retorted, slapping his offering away, still in a huff. In the pavilion, Lai Hao's chess game was only halfway done when he heard Ban Ruxi coming back. He glanced over idly, and seeing the unmistakable smile on the girl's face, he already knew the outcome, and continued to focus on his move. What's got you so happy? Share it so I can be happy too. I won, said Ban Ruxi as she dashed into the pavilion, full of high spirits. She eagerly fixed her sparkling eyes on Lai Hao, as if waiting for praise for her achievements. Lai Hao chuckled and placed another piece, as expected of Zither. Impressive. With that praise, the little girl's smile bloomed even more broadly. You go ahead and play, Brother Hao. I'll give you something delicious to eat in a bit, she said. Or. Lai Hao noticed the wooden box in her hand, but he asked no further questions and continued his chess battle with Lai Fu, quickly bringing the game to an end. Lai Fu's chess skills were only average among amateurs, far from a professional level, which meant that whenever Lai Hao played against him, he could only gain 1 or 2 points of experience. As a result, he couldn't help but ruefully think that the assassin had struck too soon. What's the good stuff? Lai Hao turned around carelessly and looked at the wooden box beside him. Ban Ruxi put down her sword on the chair, carried the food box to the table, opened the lid, and a scent of milk wafted out. Someone gave me these milk cakes, they look really tasty. Brother Hao, would you like to try some? Who sent them? Lai Hao didn't immediately take one, but asked with a sense of caution. Ban Ruxi was taken aback, thought for a moment, then shook her head. I forgot to ask his name, but Brother Hao, you should know him. It's the one we often run into when we go to greet the head lady in the morning. Those kids. Lai Hao was surprised. Lai Fu gave him a look, as if to say, aren't you a kid yourself? But he had long been used to Lai Hao's old-fashioned way of speaking. Aha, Ban Ruxi nodded. Lai Hao felt a bit more at ease. You girl, you've been training in the martial arts field with them for a year already. How could you not remember their names? Ban Ruxi looked at him with a hint of grievance. They never told me their names. They definitely have, and even if they haven't, the attendants around them would mention it. It's just that you haven't been paying attention, Lai Hao remarked, annoyed. Then I will ask again next time, Ban Ruxi said with a sullen face. You should be more sociable, or you'll get bullied in the future, Lai Hao advised her. Nonsense, Ban Ruxi immediately raised her head, her face showing a hint of pride. Teacher said I have great talent, and will become very strong in the future. Then I'll protect Brother Hao, and I won't let anyone bully you again. Just take good care of yourself. I haven't been bullied, Lai Hao replied, considering that his own daily life in the courtyard chess playing and strolling was too comfortable, almost like he had retired early. Boy, Zither is offering this with all her heart. What's with your attitude? Lai Fu couldn't stand it and scolded. Lai Hao looked at him helplessly. The guy wasn't that old, in his 40s, yet he acted like an old traditionalist. Not bothering to argue, Lai Hao turned to him and said, Fu, you try it first. Test for poison. Although those kids aren't bad people, I'm worried they could be used by someone else. Lai Fu nodded slightly, then took another look at Lai Hao. This youngster always gave off mixed feelings. Sometimes he was meticulous, at other times, he seemed clueless. After taking a bite of the fragrant cake, Lai Fu then closed his eyes. A moment later, as Lai Hao was getting impatient, he asked, How is it? There shouldn't be an issue, right? Say something, Fu. It tastes good. Lai Fu opened his eyes and said. Lai Hao rolled his eyes at him, and immediately told Ban Ruxi, hurry up and eat before it gets cold. He also picked up a piece and started tasting it. It did taste good indeed, and he said, it's somewhat like fifth lady's craftsmanship. Was it Lai Yun who sent you this, or his sister Lai Shining? It was Brother Yun. Ban Ruxi could still distinguish between brother and sister. Next time tell that kid to bring more. This little amount, who's it enough for? Lai Hao devoured his half rapidly, but left the other half for Ban Ruxi. Ban Ruxi nodded, registering it in her mind. Lai Fu shook his head discreetly on the side. At such a young age, why did this boy have such an air of shamelessness about him? Which was quite distinct from the solemn and respectful style of the Lai family manner. Several days later, the divine general mansion suddenly welcomed a distinguished guest. There was a bit of commotion inside the mansion, and the ladies of each court, upon receiving the news, hurried to visit, learning that the guest was none other than that person from the Sword Saint. If they could establish some connection, and have their children become his disciples, their future would surely be remarkable. Among them, the concubines were especially active. Their children's training resources couldn't compare with those of the legitimate family, so a lot of the best opportunities had to be fought for on their own. Jianlin, entertaining the guest in Eternal Spring Court, felt the frequent flitting of figures outside and understood their motives. She wasn't blaming anyone, but when she heard what the rumoured Sword Saint said, her face showed a touch of surprise. After talking for a while, He Jianlin nodded slightly, stood up, and accompanied the guest to see them off. Soon after, mountain and river courtyard welcomed its long-lost liveliness as a big group of figures approached. Lai Hao, playing chess in the pavilion and hearing the disturbance, was puzzled, and then saw the leading head lady, with a long white-haired old man beside her. The old man had sharp eyebrows and prominent cheekbones, giving off a very robust and lean impression. Next to this unfamiliar old man was another elder, one from the martial training ground that Lai Hao had seen several times and was fairly familiar with. What's going on? Lai Hao didn't understand the situation. Lai Fu, sitting opposite him, saw the white-haired elder, and his pupil shrank in shock. Then he stood up quickly. As he felt astonished, he suddenly thought of something and became secretly excited. Lai Hao seldom saw Fu so stirred up and realized immediately that this unfamiliar elder must be a very important figure. However, there weren't many who could make the Lai family treat them with such regard. Looking at the unfinished game, Lai Hao felt a bit reluctant, but had to set it aside for now and waited silently. Lai Fu. He Jianlin saw Lai Fu and immediately beckoned him lightly, then called out to Lai Hao, come over here. Lai Hao had to stand up and walk over. Where's Seer? He Jianlin asked again. Lai Hao pointed to another part of the courtyard. She's practicing her swordsmanship over there. Zhujian, go call Seer over. He Jianlin commanded a maid standing by her side. Chapter 20. Sword Saint Senior, this is the child of Changgang, Lai Hao. While the maid went to call Bain Ruxu, he Jianlin introduced him to the white-haired elder beside her. Speaking of Hao Er's name, it was granted by Emperor Yu. What do you think of this child? When Emperor Yu was mentioned, the white-haired elder glanced at the woman and immediately understood her intentions, feeling slightly displeased, but he said nothing and began assessing the young boy before him. Lai Hao was also looking up and sizing up the other party. When he heard the title the elderly lady used for the old man, he was somewhat surprised and understood why Fu's reaction had been so significant. Previously, while searching through chess manuals at Listening Rain Tower, he had also come across interesting stories and deeds of significant figures in Jianhu. In the records of Jianhu figures from the past century, only 3 were known as sword saints. One resided in southern Sword Hut, one had retired in the green lakes amid the yellow sands of the North Desert, and another was like a dragon seen in head, but not in tail. All 3 were masters of swordsmanship, startling the world with their swords, revered as sword saints. Which of the 3 sword saints was the strongest had been a perpetual topic of debate for enthusiasts over the past 100 years. His own third uncle, possessing extremely high talent in sword Dao, had cleaved half of the Jianghu and demon forest of Dingji with a single sword stroke and yet had not been entitled as a sword saint, which spoke volumes of this old man's terrifying strength. He wondered, which one of the 3 was he? As their gazes met, Lai Hao immediately saw in the old man's eyes a deeply hidden sword intent, profound as the sea and abyss. Yet this sword intent was concealed beneath dark and placid eyes, imperceptible unless one had a second-level understanding of the sword Dao. I hear the child of Changgang has failed in both foundation establishment and blood melting and lacks martial arts talent. Jian Wuda coolly looked down at the child before him. The Kailan children of the Divine General Mansion were regarded as extremely prestigious, second only to the imperial heirs, but to him, they were nothing significant, and there was no need to show deference to a mere child. He Jianlin's face stiffened slightly as she nodded. Correct. Hence, I wanted to see, Sword Saint Senior, if this child has the talent for swordsmanship. If, in the future, he can engage in body cultivation and learn the sword, it would be his way of serving the nation and guarding a region for Dayu. At the mention of guarding, Jian Wudo's expression shifted slightly, softening a bit. Given his status, as long as the older generation of the Lai family did not intervene, he did not need to concern himself with the thoughts of the younger generation. But the Lai family's great achievements over thousands of years indeed commanded respect, especially in recent decades when occasional turmoil at the frontier pass saw 6 of the 9 sons of the Lai family fallen in battle, a fact solemn enough to command profound respect. Let's observe together in a while, Jian Wudo calmly said. He Jianlin was delighted, nodding her head. Soon, Bain Ruxu was brought before everyone by Zhujian, the little girl obviously nervous before the crowd of adults. She instinctively stood behind Lai Hao, using him to shield half of her body. This scene was familiar to her. It had occurred during Lai Hao's foundation establishment and bone measuring. Only, the expressions of those adults afterward had made her feel sad. Sword Saint Senior, this is the sword Dao prodigy I mentioned to you on behalf of Bai Jing, said an elder from the military, moving forward with small steps and speaking respectfully as soon as Bain Ruxu arrived. Jian Wudo nodded slightly. He had come mainly because his third disciple had tirelessly entreated him, talking about the maiden from the Divine General Mansion as if she was something miraculous. Having a fondness for talent, he had then descended from the Sword Cottage for a visit to this flourishing age. Power Passage Realm Level 10, perfection, robust skeletal structure, not bad. Jian Wudo identified the young girl's cultivation realm in a glance, his eyes showing satisfaction, having heard she was a 9th grade battle physique, top-tier talent, meaning she wouldn't need much worrying over in terms of future cultivation practices. Little girl, demonstrate your best swordsmanship for me, Jian Wudo said. Bain Ruxu looked at the unfamiliar yet imposing elderly man, feeling nervous, and subconsciously glanced at Lai Hao for reassurance. Understanding that it was Zhu's opportunity, Lai Hao immediately smiled and pushed her forward, saying, "Don't be afraid, don't be nervous, I'm right here." Encouraged by Lai Hao, Bain Ruxiu's timidity dissipated quite a bit, and she nodded. The little girl then walked to the side, and without needing He Jianlin to signal, the rest naturally made way for the young girl. Quickly, Bain Ruxiu's swordsmanship swept out, like snow cascading down, her posture as graceful as a startled swan, with a mastery and agility in her movements that carried an essence of returning to simplicity and truth. This essence was immediately captured by Jian Wudao, who had been immersed in the sword Dao for nearly 100 years. The old man's sharp, elongated eyes, like sword blades, suddenly widened, revealing an unmistakable thrill of excitement. This was more than mere talent in the sword Dao, it was the rare genius of the sword Dao that one might see once in a century. At this age, to have cultivated a superior sword technique to perfection was already enough to match his most outstanding disciple, not to mention that there was now a hint of ultimate refinement. What an exceptional sword training prodigy. Jian Wudao couldn't help but burst into laughter, the hearty sound causing the dry leaves on the nearby trees to tremble and fall. Worth it. So worth it. The trip to the mortal world had not been in vain. The people around, hearing the sword saint's resonant laughter, immediately knew that the girl's destiny had soared from that moment on. Although already highly esteemed in the divine general mansion, praised by the world, it was really meeting a master like the sword saint that she truly climbed to the peak, with a future promising to make her a household name, celebrated for generations. In an instant, countless complex gazes in the courtyard converged on the young girl holding the sword. Bain Ruxiu stopped her sword movements, feeling the intense gaze focused on her, and looked nervously towards Lai Hao. Lai Hao gave her a toothy smile, and gave a thumbs up. Bain Ruxiu understood the gesture, it was praise for doing a great job. Thus, the young girl also relaxed and smiled broadly. "You've recommended well, very well indeed." The previously serious-faced Jian Wudao, now radiating a commanding aura, laughed heartily, slapping the shoulder of an old military man beside him. If it weren't for his connection with his third disciple, who highly recommended her, he wouldn't have stumbled upon such an exceptional sword talent. "The senior flatters us, it's Sier's fortune to be apprenticed under the sword saint," the old military man said, visibly moved. The two appeared similar in appearance, both looking like men in their 60s, but in reality, the differences in their ages and statuses were extraordinarily vast. Jian Wudao smiled, in excellent spirits. He walked over to the young girl, bent down, and in a pleasant tone said, "Young lady, you like the sword, right? How about I take you on a journey to train?" Bain Ruxiu was slightly stunned and asked, "Where to?" "Sword Cottage." Jian Wudao, smiling, revealed this holy land coveted by swordsmen all over the world, saying, "I will teach you swordsmanship there, the best there is." Bain Ruxiu, not understanding, simply asked, "Is it far?" "About 9,000 miles to the south, which, for you, is quite far," Jian Wudao said with a smile. Bain Ruxiu immediately looked toward Lai Hao, not far away, and said, "Brother Hao, are you going too?" Jian Wudao then realized that he had forgotten another child. He Jianlin tiny approached, quietly smiling, "Sword Saint Senior, you've yet to witness Hao Er's talent in the sword Dao. It's said he also possesses an innate sensibility for it." "Yes, Senior," Lai Fu added excitedly, sensing an opportunity. When Zhu practices her swordsmanship, the young master often watches on the side, even giving her some solid advice. Though he isn't trained formally, he seems to have his own understanding and talent for the sword Dao. Jian Wudao was somewhat surprised, glancing at Lai Hao, his brow slightly furrowed, but out of respect for He Jianlin nearby, he immediately said, "All right, give him a sword. Let him demonstrate whatever sword move he wants." "Thank you, Sword Saint Senior." Lai Fu was overjoyed, thanking him profusely, then turned to Bain Ruxiu, "Monsieur, please lend your sword to the young master for a moment." Bain Ruxiu obediently nodded, handing the sword over to Lai Hao. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this chapter, please like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next one. Until next time, happy listening and stay lost in the story.